The letter arrived on a Wednesday, tucked behind a grocery flyer. I thought it was another discount until I saw his name. It said, Estate of David Santos, and my hands went cold. My son looked up from his cereal, sensing something shift. I opened it slowly, afraid of what might spill out. There it was, an outstanding balance, past due, with interest. 5 figures that felt like a tidal wave, years too late. My first thought was, this has to be wrong. But the numbers were precise, and so was the memory. David never told us about a debt. He told us to live simple, and he made it seem easy. "Mom," my son said, voice small but steady. "Is it a scam?" he asked, and I wanted to say yes. Instead, I said, "I don't know yet, Ben." I called the number and my voice shook. The woman at the agency had a calm, practiced voice. She asked for a reference number, and I read it slowly. "This is an old consolidation loan," she said gently. "It resurfaced due to a lien adjustment and missed contact." My mouth went dry because David was gone 5 years. "We didn't know," I told her, and I meant it. "I understand," she said, and I felt she almost did. She explained how the lender merged with another institution. Some old files got reanalyzed and interest recalculated. A mistake maybe, but now it was very real. "We needed documentation," she said, "proof of payments and records." I thanked her, hung up, and leaned on the counter. Ben stood there, silent, bracing himself like his father used to. He said, "Dad wouldn't hide something like this." I looked at the ceiling and whispered, "He did, sweetheart." We started in the hall closet, where David kept his tools. The metal box was behind spare batteries and tangled cords. Inside were tax returns, warranties, and an old leather folder. It smelled like dust and his cologne, faint and stubborn. Ben sat on the floor, legs folded, eyes focused. I pulled out a stack of receipts bound with a rubber band. Payments every month, neat handwriting, consistent for years. There were notes in the margins, short and private. Interest raised again. Protect them. Keep this quiet. Ben read that line and looked at me, waiting. I wanted to be angry, but the anger didn't come. Instead, something else rushed through, heavy and tender. "He carried this alone," I said, voice breaking. "He carried us," Ben answered, almost apologizing to the air. We kept reading until the pages blurred with tears. The ledger told stories he never spoke aloud. He skipped repairs to keep payments on time. He worked Sundays and snuck the overtime into the loan. There were notes about groceries and gas rationed with care. Sometimes he wrote, "No to vacation," then drew a small star, like he was promising something later, to us or himself. Ben found an envelope labeled, "For when I can't explain." We didn't open it yet. We weren't ready. I could hear him laughing at family dinners in my head. I could see him stacking plates, washing quietly, counting pennies inside. He had never said we were in danger. He had never asked for help, even from me. Ben said he thought he was protecting us. He was protecting pride, I said, then regretted it. We sat on the floor until the light turned blue. We went to the cemetery the next morning, plain and early. I carried the envelope like it might break open. Ben walked beside me, shoulders squared, eyes set ahead. The stone had his name and daisies from last week. I rested the envelope on the grass and breathed. "Dad," Ben said, "we found the papers." "We're not mad," he added, surprising himself as much as me. I touched the carved dates and felt the years collapse. "We need the truth," I whispered, letting the words fall. We didn't open the envelope there either. It felt wrong, like reading his diary in public. Instead, We promised him we'd handle it with care. We promised to ask questions before judging. Ben pressed his palm to the stone and nodded. We left with the silence heavy but gentler somehow. She checked the account and looked at the screen too long. "Your husband made consistent payments for 8 years," she said. "The original principal was larger than average for his income." My chair felt too small for the numbers she was saying. "What was it for?" Ben asked, voice steady now. She hesitated, then pulled a scanned application from archives. "Stated purpose: family business assistance and medical expenses." My stomach tightened at the word medical. Jolene continued, "There are co-signer notes, but they're redacted." She slid us a contact for records and dispute options. Her voice softened. He was never late until the last month. Ben stared at the date of that last payment. It was the month he started coughing and hid it from everyone. We drove straight to Uncle Ray's shop without calling first. The bell over the door rang like an accusation. Ray looked older, shoulders tired under a stained shirt. When he saw us, he wiped his hands on a rag. "Is this about David?" he asked, and I nodded. Ben put the ledger down on the counter, open. "He was paying for you," Ben said, eyes not blinking. Ray's face broke in a way I'd never seen. "He saved the shop," Ray whispered, voice collapsing inward. "But he never told you, because he said it was his choice." He reached into a drawer and pulled out another folder. Inside were receipts from payments he had tried to make back. They were small, irregular, never enough to catch up. "I kept meaning to tell you," he said, eyes wet. I wanted to hate him, but grief complicated everything. Ray told it like someone paying penance with words. The shop was failing when the economy dipped. David had stepped in saying, "Family doesn't drown alone." Then their mother got sick and bills doubled overnight. Ray said David insisted on consolidating everything quietly. "He said you'd worry," Ray murmured, gesturing toward me. "He said Ben needed stability more than explanations." Ray described David working overtime, fixing cars after midnight. He'd nap in the office, then go home and smile. Ray cried when he admitted he let David carry most of it. "I thought I'd catch up," he said, throat tight, "but the interest ate me alive." Ben stood there, absorbing every missing piece of his father. "He trusted you," Ben said, not accusing, just stating. Ray nodded, like the truth itself was heavy to hold. We opened the envelope that evening at the kitchen table. Inside was a single page, handwritten, patient, and plain. "If you're reading this, I didn't do my job fully. I wanted you to live light, even if I didn't." He wrote about fear, not pride, not ego. "Debt is a promise I made in a dark hallway," he wrote. "I would do it again, for family, and I'm sorry." I kept quiet because I kept hoping it would end. It didn't. But it bought us time we desperately needed. Ben cried in a way I hadn't seen since the funeral. "I wish he told us," he said, wiping his face roughly. "I could have helped." I told him, "He was helping you by not asking." We sat there, 3 chairs and only 2 occupied. The empty one felt like a person holding our hands. The next week we met Jolene again with new documents. Ben had organized receipts into a timeline, methodical and careful. "We want to resolve this," I told her, shoulders steady. "But we need dignity, not punishment," Ben added, firm. Jolene reviewed everything, eyes flicking between pages and us. "Your husband paid relentlessly," she said, voice gentler than before. "Given the circumstances, we can reduce the principal significantly." I exhaled like I'd been underwater for too long. We signed a new agreement, honest and reachable. Ben took a second shift at the bookstore without complaint. I dusted off my nursing license and picked up evenings. Ray handed over a small payment each month, no excuses. We kept the ledger on the mantel, a quiet reminder. Every payment we made felt like returning pieces of time. Not to erase the past, but to honor it carefully. Neighbors began telling stories we'd never heard before. David had fixed Mrs. Wilcox's heater without charging. He drove Mr. Wang to appointments when buses didn't come. He slipped cash into a church envelope marked General Fund. He taught Ben to change a tire at 10. He taught me to breathe during storms we didn't name. People came by with casseroles and memories like small lanterns. "He saved me," someone would say, then stare at their shoes. Ben listened, shoulders straighter each story, grief shifting shapes. I realized the debt wasn't just money. It was the ledger of kindnesses, overdue for recognition. We didn't throw a fundraiser, we didn't make a spectacle. But when envelopes appeared on our mat, we accepted them humbly. Some held $20, some held notes saying, "He helped us once." We wrote thank you cards and kept our pride in perspective. The hardest month came with a broken radiator and deadlines. Ben came home exhausted, smelling like paper and coffee. He dropped his backpack and said, "We can do this." I rapped his knuckles like I used to for David. Ray called every Friday to confirm his transfer went through. "No excuses," he said, and he meant it this time. We cut cable, sold the old treadmill, canceled extra subscriptions. I packed lunches again, simple and cheap, but ours. We argued once about selling the piano. Ben said, "It's worth more than money," and I believed him. On Sunday nights, we opened the ledger together. We wrote the dates and the amounts, same as David did. We added a new section labeled "Paid with Love and Stubbornness." It sounds corny, but it kept us steady. We learned the balance that mattered was in our voices. Months later, Jolene called with final numbers and good news. "You've met the reduced principal," she said, sounding pleased. "A few more payments and this file can close." I thanked her and felt a knot release in my chest. Ben smiled like sunlight breaking through a heavy sky. We decided to keep one last appointment at the bank, not because we needed to, but for closure. Jolene shook our hands longer than usual and said, "Well done." Ben joked, "Do we get a certificate?" She laughed and said, "You get your lives back." We walked out into winter light, breath fogging together. I told Ben he didn't fail us. Ben said he raised the bar for us. We weren't lighter because the debt was gone. We were stronger because of what it had taught us. We visited David's grave with the final receipt in a plastic sleeve. The grass was shorter, the daisies fresh this time. Ben read the receipt aloud like a prayer. "Final payment received. Account closed," he said, voice steady. I set the sleeve against the stone and exhaled slowly. "We didn't do it alone," I told the ground truthfully. "But we did it right," Ben added, brushing dirt off the date. We stood there longer than necessary, listening to the quiet. I remembered his letter and the line about dark hallways. I promised to keep our lights on, even when it's hard. Ben promised to ask for help before the water rises. We didn't ask for forgiveness. We didn't need to. We thanked him for loving us with work we never saw. We left the sleeves with the daisies, not as trophies. They were simply proof of how love counts its costs. Back home, we moved the ledger from the mantel to a drawer, not to hide it, but to let it rest. Ben started an internship with a local credit counseling office. "People deserve to understand," he said, eyes bright. I took fewer shifts and baked on Saturdays again. Ray stopped by more, not to apologize, but to belong. He fixed the radiator properly one weekend without charging. We laughed about how David would have scolded him for that. At dinner, we talked about choices without whispering. We talked about money without fearing it like thunder. Every night felt like a small step toward gentleness, not just with each other, but with our memories of him. "He wasn't a hero," Ben said one evening, unexpected and calm. "He was a man who kept promises, even hard ones." I said, That's what hero means around here.